This is the Decarbonisation Dialogue, a podcast from Salix.
Welcome to Delivering on Climate Change, our collective challenge. Welcome to the Decarbonisation Dialogue. I am Hannah Walker, and I believe that the best way to communicate a message is by being passionate about what you are talking about. Through that passion, I believe you take people with you and create action using your influence to make change and make a difference. Our task today is to get all of us to net zero. Today I have Emma Holland-Lindsay with us as our special guest, and Emma is Head of Public Affairs at the National Federation of Women's Institutes. Emma oversees the Institute's campaigning and influencing work, focused on securing positive change on the issues that matter to WI members. This includes the provision of a research and policy development function, campaign development, and managing relationships with decision makers. Before joining the WI in January 2016, Emma held a range of campaign management roles in the charity sector, following a number of years working in politics. She has also previously worked for national disability charities. The WI is a unique organisation shaped by its members. In 1915, it set out to give women a voice and to be a force for good in the community, and it has grown ever since. Today, it is the largest women's organisation in the UK and prides itself on being a trusted place for all women of all generations to share experiences and learn from each other. So, big welcome to Emma today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having us on.
Superb. So can we start by talking a little bit about you and your career? What inspires you to want to make a difference, to influence and to help shape the world?
Look, I've always had a passion for, inspiring women to get involved in public life and make their voices heard. And I suppose, I started my career in politics. I worked for a couple of members of parliament, and that was really interesting because you see sort of from the inside, both how change is made, in parliament, how decisions are arrived at, the impact that citizens can have, but also the things that are on the public's mind. You're kind of at the front line of whatever those issues are that people are coming to their MP about, whether it's personal, national, international. And I realised I really wanted to be supporting people, supporting women particularly, to make their voices heard and to speak up when they felt that something needed to change. So I worked in politics for a few years and then went into the charity sector, ultimately, landing at the WI. And what I love about the WI is that it, our whole ethos for 110 years has been about doing just that, about supporting women, connecting them together, allowing them to inspire each other and ultimately make a difference on the issues that matter to women in their communities. So, yeah, that's sort of what drives me really. And I think, particularly reflecting on the climate issue, one of the things I really realised working in politics is this is just not something that people are writing to their MPs about in any great numbers, and actually if we want our decision makers to act on these issues, we have to be shouting louder. And so that has really underpinned a lot of the work that I've done at the WI.
Okay. So let's talk about climate change for a moment, because we're facing huge challenges in this area. The WI has a history of taking action to protect the environment, whether it's water pollution, acid rain, ozone layers, CFCs, deforestation, renewable energy. There's a strong, as you say, thread of campaigning from the WI. And in fact, it's the founding member of the Climate Coalition. How do you think policymakers, how can you impact policymakers to take decisive action to tackle climate change and to encourage community networks to come together?
WI is a very grassroots up organisation. So we have 180,000 members in about 5,000 WI groups across England, Wales and the islands. So our members are deeply rooted in their communities, and we really see those roots, those local connections, as being absolutely critical to getting change on climate change. As I mentioned before, we know that this is not an issue that decision makers hear about a great deal, and we ultimately, through our campaigning at the WI, have wanted to change that. And so that's been about supporting our members with the tools to go out and talk about climate change in their communities, to talk to decision makers about why that's important to them. And I think with climate, it's a huge issue. It feels often even to those of us who are working on these issues, too big to solve. And what we've done, what our WI members have done is make it really local, talk about what you need to do to make your community resilient to climate change, whether that is planting more trees to deal with extreme temperatures, thinking about how we might handle flooding better when we know that extremes of weather are coming along, and linking up within the community to think about what positive steps we can take locally. And that's proved quite powerful when it's come to talking to decision makers, because our members have kind of gone to them and said, look, this is what we think needs to happen in our community. This is how we are taking action to change it, whether it's running tree planting projects, creating community gardens, linking up with other groups. And here's what we need you as our representative in Parliament or our representative on a local council to do. So for us, it's always been really rooted in that link between, a constituent and their elected representative, but making it really local and making it really community driven.
It is that delicate balance, Emma, isn't it, about not having that climate anxiety so intense that it creates this inaction. In terms of your specific campaigns, what specific climate campaigns are you working on with your members?
We're just in the process of launching our new campaign called Fair Green Future. And that is really about making people feel empowered to make change on climate change and embedding fairness into our action on climate change. We've had a very long-standing climate change campaign for many years, as you mentioned, but we are concerned that climate does impact different groups differently, particularly has a huge impact on women, and we want to make the case that everyone needs to be included in the conversations about how we go about tackling it. This has been a thread running through our work for a really long time, particularly obviously women's experiences. And we know globally women are on the forefront of climate change, most often providing for their families, whether it's securing food, for example, reliant on agricultural work, for example, and they are incredibly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, particularly in the situation of disaster, for example. The majority of those displaced by climate-related events are women, for example. So we know globally that women are at the forefront, and also in the UK the same. Women and other vulnerable groups are feeling the impacts most heavily, whether it's extreme heat, rising food prices, for example. We know women are more likely to live in poverty. So our campaign is really about highlighting those issues and pushing really strongly for government and both, nationally and internationally, to be including a whole range of groups in the discussion and the debate and the decisions about the solutions.
Because, of course, the global issue is of big impact, and the UN report, the Gender Snapshot 2024 report, indicated that by 2050, climate change may push up to 158 million women and girls into poverty, which apparently, according to this report, is 16 million more than boys and men. So those are quite stark figures when you talk globally about those issues and about how far women are impacted. I think today the report indicated that 47.8 million more women face food insecurity and hunger than men. So they are huge issues globally as well as locally. But is there a balance? Because being more sustainable, women, whether it's whoever it is not always the cheapest and most effective and most efficient way for us to live. Is there a balance between these issues and our pockets and our budgets?
Particularly at this time, when we have cost of living challenges in this country, and as you've so rightly said, globally, women are incredibly vulnerable, amongst the poorest. These things are at the front of minds for everyone, and I think that's what has sort of driven us to focus on this idea of fairness. We know that climate and the policies we need to address climate can impact people differently, and we need what we would call a fair transition, so that we protect those who are on low incomes, and we ensure that the benefits and costs of action are shared justly. What I think is missing from the discussion here in the UK is sort of the benefits that climate action is going to bring. We know, for example, our homes are some of the worst insulated in Europe. Actually, if we can find a way, and I think we need government to do more to make it cost effective and affordable for everyone to insulate their homes, that's going to have benefits for energy bills, doesn't it? Same on things like transport, for example. Cheaper transport is good for everyone. More carbon friendly transport is better for things like air quality. So there are benefits which are not really coming out in the debate and the discussion. I think we need a much more reasoned and balanced discussion about those.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think you move to that? Because that how do you think you do improve that quality of debate around climate change?
I think there's a huge amount of fear, negativity, cost, talking about the loss of things that are sort of dominating the debate. And we've done a lot of work, again, focusing very much locally, personal relationships, on trying to sort of turn that on its head. We've had a brilliant program with an organisation called Larger Us, focused around climate conversations, because actually, even for our WI members who are incredibly passionate about these issues, it can feel quite daunting to talk about climate change. You might feel you have to be a scientist and you've got to have facts and statistics at your fingertips, when actually there are lots of ways to talk about these issues in a kind of non-confrontational way, talking about the things that we're seeing in our everyday lives, things like the seasons changing, weather patterns changing, for example, and just opening a conversation which is not about persuading someone. It's not about trying to get them on board with a particular course of action, but starting to dismantle this idea that climate is something that we can't talk about or that is very negative. And so we've run a brilliant series of climate conversations programs where our members have taken training, gone out and started talking about climate change, which I think they found really, daunting at first, but actually has proved really positive and has opened up conversation in a less sort of heated way and a less negative and frightening way. So I really do think it has to start with that local, really, those local perspectives.
Is that ongoing, that project you've just mentioned, people going out?
Yeah,
your members. Is that driven by the members, or how does that work?
Yeah, it really came out of a desire from our members to do something locally on climate change. And we've always had a really strong history of practical action, things like tree planting, community gardens, thinking about nature-based solutions to climate change. But our members wanted to go out and talk about it and find ways to open up conversations. So we've worked with a number of organisations, Climate Outreach being one, who've done some brilliant research looking at showing actually the great support for climate action that's out there amongst the public and how to go about communicating it, which doesn't mean being a scientist. And so we've had our members going out, having conversations in the post office queue, at the school gate, just finding gentle ways into the conversation about climate change. And we hope that that's very much the start of changing the narrative and changing policy on it. And, that's something that's been at the heart of our ethos in the WI for a long time. HIV and AIDS in 1986, we ran a national conversation encouraging women to learn about HIV and AIDS at a time when there was a huge stigma and that women were not seen as at risk by government. And we sort of, started to change the narrative. And that's what we want to do on climate change.
Mm-hmm. So the conversations are happening locally in the UK. We've talked about the climate crisis globally, the fact that it's not gender neutral. We've talked about those issues. But how is the WI, or if at all, in what ways are you working with organisations across the world on issues like poverty, climate impact, etc.? Can you explain some of that work?
We've always had, and our members have always had, a sort of international outlook. And if you look back to our past, the WI was very supportive of things like creation of the UN. We're a founder member of the Fair Trade Foundation. So we've always had an interest in international development, and our members have always had a passion for it. And what that sort of translates now is what I would call allyship with our wider women's organisations working in international development. And we know it is an incredibly challenging time. We've seen in the UK, the aid budget is being cut, and we are really concerned that we need a thread running through all of the work that the UK government does focused on gender equality, because we know that when women are more equal, we see societies progress more, we see wealth more shared, and we also see women less vulnerable to climate impacts, because their voices are being heard. So we've been working with the likes of Care International and some of the other women's organisations to support their work they're doing to lobby the UK government. And we really see, our members see their voices as part of a wider sisterhood, I suppose, that is international, that does span the globe, speaking up for women across the world whose voices are not always heard. And one of the things we've done in the climate space is push really hard alongside many other organisations for women to have an equal place at the table. Because unfortunately, when it comes to things like international negotiations, women's voices are still not represented. So we really see our role as one of advocacy, building those links between women's organisations, whether it's UK or international, and coming together to elevate the voices that are perhaps not always being heard.
This is a fascinating part of this discussion, and that's why I was so keen to speak to you and grab you and get you on this issue. So thank you very much for that. Your everyday role, Emma, what does it look like? How do you spend your day? You must have a huge amount of information coming into your inbox every day.
Yeah, I regard myself honestly as so lucky to work at the WI, and I'm, endlessly inspired by our members and the activity, that I get arriving in my inbox, photographs of river quality, water quality protests, or campaigning work they're doing with local schools on climate change. And, our members are really at the heart of everything we do, because they are the kind of inspiration and drive for all of our campaigning. All of our campaigns come directly from their views. So spend a lot of time supporting our members, thinking about ways that they can come together and benefit from training, support, connecting each other across the country. That's a big thread through what we do, so that members can learn from each other and take that learning back into their local communities. But we also do lots and lots of partnership work, Climate Coalition being one. It's, always a pleasure to be part of 80 other organisations from across the spectrum, whether that's nature organisations, citizenship, democracy, heritage organisations who come together around a shared goal. So we play a key role in supporting the climate sector, I suppose, to plan activity and to work together. And then I'm often in and out of Parliament as well, perhaps taking WI members in, speaking to members of Parliament, and regard myself as very lucky to speak on behalf of the WI, because our members are known for being passionate. They're not afraid to speak truth to power. Sometimes the response from MPs and government is one of fear, I have to say. They're slightly daunted when they hear that WI members are concerned about an issue and want to see change. So, it is a delight, honestly, to be able to support our members, really elevate their voices and find new ways to speak what they're concerned about to government and to those in power.
Superb, because that passion is really what drives you, isn't it? And that passion, how does that impact the passion for your work, the passion for the environment? How does that impact your own lifestyle? Tell us a little bit about your lifestyle habits, or have you changed?
For us in the WI, and this is through our history really, we've always started from the perspective of every woman can make a change, whether that is in your own home, in your community, whether that's getting yourself elected to Parliament, as some of our WI members have done in the past. We've always believed that every woman can be a change maker. And I suppose, you can't be at the WI long without that rubbing off on you, I suppose. And one of the things we've done, through the lens of climate is look at things like fast fashion, for example. We had a really brilliant campaign on fast fashion, which encouraged our members to learn about the environmental impacts of clothing, which are often lost or hidden, I suppose. Draw on our make, do and mend ethos, which was really part of our heritage. So that's one of the things that I've taken on in my own life. I really try hard not to buy new clothes. I've got young children, got a nice hand-me-down chain going between my own two daughters and my two nieces as well. Buying second-hand clothes, thinking about the impact of what we're buying. And that's been at the heart of what our members do every single day. So, I recognise I have the privilege to be able to do that, but trying to be a bit more thoughtful about the choices I'm making in my own life is really at the heart of it for me.
Indeed, and that is something we can all learn from. And I love that statement about every woman is a change maker. It's that has real impact. You've got a highly successful career. You've achieved an awful lot already. What next for you?
And that's really, really kind of you to say. Thank you. I mean, I remain so committed to making sure that women's voices are heard. And so that is absolutely at the core of what I want to do and continue to do at the WI. And so we've got some really ambitious plans to keep growing our organisation, reaching out to new groups of women to make sure that their voices are heard. So that's definitely at the core of it for me. And I think, in the climate space, I think what we're doing, and I say we, meaning the WI, but also all of us out there who have a passion for climate change, that could not be more important. Because for me, I've worked in this space for 9 years now, and it feels the most challenging it has been for a really long time in terms of the public debate. And I think so growing that grassroots movement of those of us who care about these issues, showing that the public do care, because we know the public do care about climate change, but all too often feel that they can't make a difference on it. So I really want to keep growing and amplifying our work out there in communities, helping more women, supporting them to make their voices heard. So yeah, that's definitely next on the list.
I do hope you'll come along again and talk to us, because there is, as you say, a huge amount of work still to be done. Thank you to Emma Holland-Lindsay today for providing such incredible insight. There can be no doubt that climate change is the biggest challenge of our time. Today, we must reduce greenhouse gas emissions to slow global warming. Today, we must act for tomorrow, adjusting our lifestyles to current and future impacts of climate change. Today, we must use our collective wisdom to deliver on our climate commitments. Today, we work for tomorrow's world. Please don't forget to subscribe to our podcast channels and email us on podcast@salixfinance.co.uk. We'd love to know what you think, and please, we'd also love to have some of your ideas for some podcasts to come. But thank you once again to Emma for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
You've been listening to the Decarbonisation Dialogue, a podcast from Salix. For more information about our work and to find more content, please visit salixfinance.co.uk/podcasts.